All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Aware Athlete Show. As always, I'm your host, Scott Forrester, and today's guest, we're very happy to have with us Benny Mailman. He has, to start with, an unusual name there. And
Yes.
in fact, I carried mail for 22 years. But I'd like to introduce the show because Benny is a world traveler. He's got lots of adventures to talk about. In fact, his life is so rich that I'm going to have a great deal of difficulty introducing him. But since he is a world traveler, he's got so many stories to tell, I'd like to introduce the show with a quote that many of you are probably familiar with, attributed to Helen Keller: "Life is a great adventure or nothing at all." And if Benny is nothing if not an adventure. So Benny actually grew up in a log cabin in Green Bay, Wisconsin, famous Green Bay, Wisconsin. And Benny has been a world traveler. He's traveled extensively in Asia, but also Russia, which I think would be quite an adventure because I understand that Russian is a difficult language to learn. And not only that, but in the United States, Benny's been exposed to a number of different cultures. He lived on the East Coast in New York City, which is a culture to itself, even in the state of New York. He's lived in the middle of the country in Denver, which I consider a little bit west, in Las Vegas, of all places, and on the West Coast in Los Angeles. So experienced a lot of cultures here. And Benny is an author. We'll get into that later. He's been a Marine. And if you're interested in what we're talking about here in the very general way, in terms of world travel, Benny can tell you about traveling on a small budget. So I don't want to forget that he's trekked the mountains of Nepal. But
Yes.
and I haven't even mentioned stand-up comedy. So we're very pleased to have you on the show today, Benny. And Benny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott. I am very happy to be here. I will say I was born in Green Bay. The log cabin I grew up was in Sparta, Wisconsin. And but I love that you mentioned Green Bay.
You're a Packers fan.
I am tried and true.
We'll just start there real briefly. What's your connection with the NFL? Just a Packers fan or anything else?
I am a huge fan of the NFL in the respect that it's my number one sport. And then if somebody asks me, what is your second favorite sport? I fill in the blank. I just love the NFL so much. And I love that game so much because I played football as a high schooler in Sparta, Wisconsin. And I did have one of my friends make it to the NFL. Mike Maslowski played for the Kansas City Chiefs, and it was to see him on television it just did my heart a lot of good to see that he had done so well to me.
Okay. All right. So your story kind of starts when you were 18 and went into the Marines. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I went into the Marines at 18 in July of 1988, and I still remember clear as day. I'm going to be 52 in a month, and it's funny. There's just certain things that you recollect like it was yesterday. And going in the Marines, I remember there was a Def Leppard concert that I was missing because I went in a day early. And I remember flying down into San Diego. I was with two of my best friends, Craig Anderson and Dave Leach. They were going into the Navy. I was going into the Marines, both in San Diego. And I remember the flight. I had fallen asleep on the flight. And when you come down into San Diego, the pressure drops. And I had such an incredible headache to start out my Marine Corps journey with. And they're yelling at you, and it's like the movies, get on the yellow footprints. And I filled out so many forms, and what's your social security number? And I wasn't even, by the time I was done with the process, I definitely had memorized my social security number.
Yeah. All right. So why did you go into the Marines? And we'll just kind of go over that just a little bit here.
That plays into who I am. I knew that there was the Army, the Navy. My father had served for a long time in the Army. My sister went into the Navy. But for me, my heart has always been to push and to push, to see what my limits are. And I knew that the Marines were the best. I knew they were the top notch. And I had to see personally if I could make it, as a Marine. And I did.
Wow. Okay. So I've known a number of Marines. I'm not a Marine myself, but it was a life-changing experience for all the people that I know that went through that. So yeah. Okay. So for the people that are listening that are purely or very interested in travel, let's go ahead and start there, and then we'll just build the story from here. You've got so much to talk about. So can you tell us how would you travel abroad on a small budget?
Well, for me, I like to tell the story that when I was in Denver, I rode the bike taxi. So we didn't touch on this, but I followed comedy in LA, New York City, Las Vegas for about 9 years, studied with Second City, actually studied under Kay Cannon, who came out with Cinderella on Amazon. That is her. And she wrote the screenplay for Pitch Perfect, and Jason Sudeikis of Ted Lasso, of many other things. Where were we? I have to think about where am I going?
We're talking about traveling abroad on a small budget, and then we started with what the Marines meant to you, and I want to really get into the meat of your story, but just to introduce it to people who are interested in travel. How do you travel on a small budget abroad?
Okay, I am very good at getting way off topic. I apologize, Scott.
That's all right, because I want to get into all of it. But.
Okay, so when I was in Denver, I realized I really had an epiphany on a blizzard, and right before I turned 42, actually, and I just said, you know what? I had a realization. I am not going to be a millionaire in this life. I am not the person that is. I have never paid reverence to money, so I knew that it was not my goal in life is happiness. So I knew that I wasn't ever going to go to extremes to give up my happiness in order to make money. So I said, go on a trip. Like, I just have always wanted to travel, and I went out probably with about $7,000. I don't even really like talking about numbers, but I think it's important for your audience to know that I set out with about $7,000, and I flew into Russia, and I just said, hey, I'm going to take this as far as I can go, as far as I can stretch the dollar or the ruble or all the other currencies, the Rio. And I ended up going for 9 months, almost 9 months.
It's pretty darn good on 7,000. Now you didn't carry that money with you?
No, that is a golden rule of mine. I write it in my first book. I say, when you go to the ATM, traveler's checks are definitely a ghost of the past, for sure. And when you get into these countries, I can't imagine that any of them would have accepted traveler's checks, especially when you get into the smaller villages. Go to an ATM, and when you go to an ATM, your money will come out in the currency of that country. You'll pay about $5, maybe even a little bit more, but that's the price of being safe with your money.
Yeah. Okay, so we established that. So what did you do in Russia? That was the first place you went, right, to Moscow?
It was. And honestly, I remember when I was planning my trip in Denver, my friends were very interested and very supportive. And my friend Tiffany asked me, why don't you just go to Russia? I was talking about China. She goes, you're so close to Russia. And I told her, I say in the book, I channeled my inner Ronald Reagan, and I said, there's no way in heck I'm going to Russia. And because that still looms, the Cold War looms in understanding of being a little bit afraid of going to Russia. But
Yeah.
then I picked up a book at the tattered cover in Denver at the bottom of the 16th
Yeah.
Street Mall on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. And I thought to myself,
Ah,
if I am going to start on an epic journey, there's no better way to start it than to get on that Trans-Siberian and cross Russia. So that's actually the only reason I flew into Russia, was to take the Trans-Siberian Railroad.
ah. So you did that. And
I did.
that goes from where to where?
That actually covers the expanse of Russia. And I took it from Moscow all the way across 5 days. We got to the largest the deepest freshwater lake in the world, Lake Baikal. And then the train took a right, and the Trans-Siberian becomes the Trans-Mongolian. And we headed down in, when I say we, I was traveling alone, but I met a lot of people on the train that I became great friends with. So often I will refer to we, even though I was technically a solo traveler.
Yeah.
And the train, you did ask the question, how far does it go? I took a right down into Mongolia after Lake Baikal, but it does go all the way across Russia.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what month was that you took
That would have been October. I flew over on October 4th of 2012.
Was it cold at all?
Oddly enough, yes, it was starting to get cold. And I remember I was on the train, and one morning I opened the shade. I was the first one up, and it was snowing on the day that we went by Lake Baikal. And I thought, wow, it felt like I was absolutely in somebody else's story, because it was snowing going past Lake Baikal, and it was just really surreal.
Yeah. So Crater Lake here in Oregon is 2,000 feet deep. How deep is Lake Baikal?
I actually don't know the numbers.
But it must be more than 2,000 then.
I'm sure it is. I know that it is ever changing, because it actually sits like on a shifting rift or something that I had read about, that it does even get deeper than that. So I'm not sure how deep it is. I just know that it's billed as the deepest freshwater lake.
So you're in Russia and you go into China then, Mongolia.
Mongolia. Mongolia is interesting because I had planned on staying there a little bit longer than I did. But because I met some, in the book, Tommy B. Hilsey from Sweden, Joachim and Malin, who are now married and have a child. It's amazing. It's so cool, the relationships. But I had met these awesome souls on the train, and I knew that I couldn't travel with them my entire time, but I knew that I should welcome that gift from the universe to travel with them as long as I could. So I went with them. Everybody was going into Beijing, and that's where I was going. I just went a little bit earlier, but I did get a chance to go in the mountains, sleep in the yurt, talk with a camel. The camel is in my book. And I rode a horse. And if I have time to give this story, Fire Horse. We were on these horses, and I was worried about my horse being a little crazy because it was biting at its rope. And it turned out to be false, because my horse was slow. It had a bad foot. But then the guide, the young Mongolian guide, Kana, came up to me, and we couldn't talk, but he kind of moved his finger and said, "Hey, do you want to switch horses?" And his horse had no saddle, and it was a solid black horse. And you may remember there was a show back in the 70s called Fury, where it's a black horse, and he would call Fury, and the horse would come running. That's what this horse reminded me of. So I got on this horse, being true to my journey. I was scared. Ghana had to help me up, because I don't have a great ability to maneuver. And I got on that horse, and it went into a straight Olympic sprint, and I was bouncing and I was scared. I was holding on to the hair on the back of its head, and we're crossing this small river, and I was afraid, but it was quite an experience and quite an adrenaline rush.
Wow. Okay, so this horse didn't have a saddle, you say?
It didn't have a saddle because it was the young guide, and I'm not an avid horse rider, and so I was very aware of the pain from my backside hitting the backside of the horse constantly. So I have that pain. I have the fear of holding on to the horse, and then I'm looking at the ground. We have water and rocks and snow, and that was another time. It started to snow right as we got on the horses, so it was like a storybook. But my story had quite an adventure there for a little while.
So riding a horse bareback is an adventure in itself. It's not for the weak-hearted.
No.
Obviously, you're a pretty bold individual. Now, some people take risks really impulsively, and some people take risks where they think things out pretty carefully, or they have they take risks that they know they can handle. What's your style of risk taking when you travel?
That is such a beautiful question, because I often try to express this exact answer to people, and I don't know that they understand. My style of risk is I don't want to pass something up. I don't want to have a regret on something. So in life, I always tell people I have the ability to say bad word it, right? The ability to say F it, right?
Yeah.
And that comes a little bit from being a Marine. But even as a young child, I just always pushed my personal limits. Now, mind you, I'm not a super talented, gifted athlete. So my limits definitely are lower, I think, than someone who would be a great athlete or gifted or talented in that respect. When I looked at that horse, I knew my mind thinks, okay, trouble, danger, you've never done this, you do not know what to expect. And then the other side of my mind says, just do it. And that side always, it usually wins. I won't say it always wins, but it usually wins. And so I just I handle risk by saying I don't want to regret not doing this.
Yeah, I want to continue with that a little bit, but let me ask you real quickly. In all your travels, how many people spoke English, and how difficult were the language barriers?
Nobody. When I was in Russia, nobody spoke English. And you'll find this funny. Americans will find this funny. When I was in Russia, I toured St. Basil's Cathedral in Red Square. And mind you, I was only in Moscow for a few days. And I heard English being spoken, and it was a couple from Boston. And anybody that knows anybody from Boston, they're not exactly the most cordial people in the world. So here I was in Russia, and I heard English, and I was so excited to talk to them, and they just shunned me, probably because they shunned me like Boston people do to most people who are not from Boston. And I thought, oh, well, there goes that opportunity.
Yeah. So you got by with hand signals and things like that a lot.
I learned in most languages, I learned how to say hello and thank you. And actually, the thing that got me through was my smile. I smiled a lot, and I am most people don't want to admit the side of them that is the dorky side of them. And I embrace it. I love being a dork, and that really helped me to get through and ditch your ego. Like, your ego is, if you want to have your ego at home, that's good. But when you travel, get rid of that thing. Like, it's, I am very much, I put myself on the same level as everybody. so that, because I feel that we are all on the same level. And if you feel that you are above someone or below someone, those are both bad feelings, right?
Yeah,
So
they
I just like to put myself in the middle. I am the middle child. I like to put myself in the middle, and has served me very well in this life.
wow. Okay. So I think that's great advice for life. I'm glad we're talking about it, but it's also got to be great advice for traveling.
It is.
Yeah.
It is because I have, when I was a young Marine, I traveled to the Philippines, to Korea, and I remember how I acted when I was young. And that's something I think that comes with youth and ego. And you can't really, everything in life is a lesson. So
That's right. Yeah.
to look back at something and say, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done that, or I wish I wouldn't have acted like that. It's all part of the journey so that you can grow and you can say, okay, I didn't like that person, but I'm not that person. So it's more important definitely about who you are right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So can you tell me where did you spend the most money in all those travels, and where did you spend the least? And how were your accommodations? And how was your nourishment, your food?
Nourishment was excellent when I went through, well, Mongolia, I wasn't there long enough to know about their nourishment. It was the restaurants were okay there. One of the odd things about Ulaanbaatar was I did not have one instance where I felt welcomed by, and not just me, the entire crew. I met some other travelers there. One guy had been mugged like 3 times. And I said, why don't you get out of the country? Like your energy is not coalescing with this area. And it's just, Mongolia is a rough area. And one guy wanted to fight us. He had brass knuckles,
Oh,
and he
God.
didn't, and this is in book 1. And I stood off to the side, and I remember he was yelling. And you realize at that point we had 13 people traveling around, and we had women with us. And I'm like, let's just get out of here. Like, leave this. That we see him, but there could be more. But it felt kind of hostile, right? And I know this is a little bit off the topic of questioning, but I always feel I want to warn people, if you go to Mongolia, make sure you're with a group and that you stay in some safe places. So China, the food in China was absolutely amazing. And China to me was, I guess I didn't know really what to expect from China, but everything in China, whether it was man-made or whether it was natural, was on such a scale you can't imagine. The high-speed rails, when they decide they want to get something done, they want to build a high-speed rail from the Shanghai to Beijing, it happens in under a year. They really move things along there. But the food, amazing. And I found that in Asia, almost all the food is 100% fresh. It's coming from gardens somewhere around that area. They all have fresh markets. Even here in Cambodia, the markets, people go every day and get their food for the day from there. And Laos, I don't know why I can't really remember the food in Laos that well. Maybe it wasn't great in Laos, I don't know. But everything was fresh and delicious. And I only had food poisoning a few times on my trip, and once was in Cambodia and once was in Thailand, actually.
Were you careful about your water?
In book 3, I travel through which I haven't written yet. That's coming out next year. In book 3, I traveled through the Annapurna Mountains, and I talk about just making some bonehead, not decisions, but just forgetting to bring water when I'm going through the Annapurna Mountains. And I was very conscious from being Marine, that's the one thing, or one of the things that they taught us: water, water, water. So I was very conscious of it. I wasn't always smart about it though.
So did you filter it or did you treat it or?
Oh, I just bought bottled water.
You bought bottled
there,
water?
yeah, there was no way I was going to drink water from the tap anywhere in the world, unless somebody told me this is 100% safe. That's an issue mankind has had from the time that we were able to start walking on this earth. Water. I mean, whether it was bad bacteria, but with all the pollution and everything in the world, we haven't made it better. So, and it wasn't that great to begin with. So I always found I do not like food poisoning, and I'm sure nobody likes food poisoning. It hurts. The stomach hurts. And you just go through. It's not good. So I did take major efforts to make sure that what I was eating and what I was drinking was safe.
Yeah. So, I got some bacteria from water once when I was young. I thought I could do anything. So I drank out of a river where people were swimming and recreating. And boy, I had diarrhea for like 6 weeks. I just couldn't get over it, and it was
Scott, it's that young mind. It's that young mind that makes me feel next month I turn 52 and I'm like, wow, I feel like I beat the odds makers.
Yeah. Yep. So any advice for people not too risk averse planning a trip like this? Want to go out and see and by the way, did you have any fear of the government in China or Russia?
I probably should have.
Yeah.
But I'm under the mindset, and maybe this is very naive, but I travel with very good energy and very good spirit and smiling and being happy. And on my entire journey, which was 8.5 months, just under 9 months, not any country did I feel threatened or in danger or anything from the authority at all. I would say coming over the border from China into Vietnam and Lokai, Vietnam, the people that were going through my bags when I was entering Vietnam seemed very stern. But when you think about it, even if you go to Canada, they're pretty tough on Americans too. So it's kind of almost like a prerequisite for being a border agent, I would guess, in any country, is to have a strong hand and at least have an imposing energy to make sure that people are hopefully being good when they come in.
Yeah. So
I'll tell you this one story. When I was in Moscow, I was very much aware of being in Russia and that I was American. So I was very careful. I talk about one time about having to go to the bathroom. I had to go to the bathroom. It was raining. It was my last night in Moscow. And I refused. My mind, I was like, I should just go to the bathroom. It's raining. It's dark. Nobody would see me here. And my mind is like, no, no, no. And that is the story where I walked in. Of all things in Moscow, I found a Starbucks. It was the only thing that was open. Starbucks sign in Russia. I walk in, I'm thrilled. They're still open. And what music is playing? Tom Waits is playing Starving in the Belly of a Whale off his album Blood Money. So I know the song, I know the album, I love Tom Waits. And I'm like, what world did I just step into? Tom Waits is playing at a Starbucks in Moscow. I ordered a double espresso, and they could barely understand that. And then I tried to tell the barista, I said, hey, this is Tom Waits. And she looked like I had just threatened her, right? Like she didn't know what I was saying. She looked scared. And I go, no, the music, this is Tom Waits. And she goes, we're closed. And I said, okay, that's one thing that you have to understand when you're traveling is that as an American, especially here in Cambodia, I teach here in Cambodia, I had to really dial it down because our average American, just how we're speaking to each other right now is brash in these cultures. These cultures are very timid, very quiet, very beautiful cultures. But you have to remember that even when you're just addressing someone that you feel is in a normal or low tone, it might be very drastic for them and scary to them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a good tip for anybody that's thinking about traveling to another culture.
Especially Americans.
Especially Americans.
We're strong. We speak strong, and we have to in other cultures realize that a lot of them don't. So if you go over to Europe, if you're in Germany, they have a stronger culture to speak in. But when you come to Asia, it's very much a little more subdued.
Okay, so you grew up in Wisconsin, and Green Bay is one of the places that you're familiar with and lived in. And
Yes.
Then you took this 9-month journey, but is that the only journey? I mean, you currently live in Cambodia.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how did that come about? You took your journey, came back, and then how did you go back and stay?
When I was, and I talk a little bit about this in book 2, is I met somebody here in Cambodia. I met a lady here in Cambodia, and the relationship was actually terrible. Like we did not really get along. But I really, something in my heart and in my mind, I wanted to live in Cambodia. I kind of knew it on my journey, but so I saw this relationship through to the end, and then ended up coming to Cambodia anyway. And I met my wife actually through friends. That's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother podcast on how we met. But now I have been living here with her, married for 3 years, and I've been in Cambodia for just under 6 years now. How did I come to fall in love? I can remember the exact moment. It was not I came into Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia, in December of 2012. But it was when I returned, I had gone through Laos and into Thailand. And then I needed to leave Thailand because of a 15-day visa. And I said, where can I go that's going to be cheap and easy? Because I didn't have a lot of money. And Siem Reap, where I had already been, the temples of Angkor Wat, it was a $10 bus ride. And I said, okay, I'll go back to Cambodia. The border town between Thailand and Cambodia is Poi Phet. And I went through Poi Phet, and that's a little, boy, Scott, you want to talk about a seedy little town that reminds you of the Old West in the US? Poi Phet, definitely. There's not one fiber of my body that said, hey, I think it would be safe here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I remember getting on that bus, Scott, and it was hot, no air condition, and from Poi Phet back into Siem Reap. And that was when I fell in love with Cambodia, the red dirt roads, the water buffalo in the rice fields, and the kids. Most of the kids ride bikes that are way too big for them. And it's just, you go through these small villages. And I grew up, I don't want to say poor, because after living here, I feel like I'm an idiot for saying that. I would feel bad for saying that. But we grew up on a farm, grew our own food, had chickens, goats, goats for milk, chickens for eggs. And we worked very hard. We heated our home with wood. So we worked very hard. I understand the difficult, not the difficult, I understand the not having a lot of money aspect in this reality. And so when I would see these villages, I felt very connected to these farmers and to these people that were in these small villages. I felt like I understood it, or I had more of a connection to them. And it was on that journey that I fell in love with Cambodia, and I felt like, hey, I could live here one day.
So when you made your first trip, you already had made that decision.
Yes, yeah, I get, my heart made that decision on my first trip, but my mind wasn't there yet. It took a few years for my mind to catch up with my heart.
Yeah. So do you speak Cambodian now?
I speak a little bit, and I'm learning. It's funny, the last few days, my wife started to go back to work, so she goes in the afternoon, and I have about 4 hours to myself that I'm not used to, right? So now I'm starting to learn the language more in depth. I can count because I'll do the counting for you up to 20, and you will see the pattern. It's a pattern of 5. So I pick up on patterns pretty good. So it's mui, pi, bai, boon, pram, pram mui, pram pi, pram bai, pram boon, dap, dap mui, dap pi, dap bai, dap boom, dap pram mui, dap pram pi, dap pram bai, mu pai. So it was the series of 5 that I was able to catch on to. And sometimes my wife, Vicheka, she will help me to learn some new words, and she will say a word. I will repeat it in my mind exactly as she said it, and she says no. So
I know. You're doing the best with what you can hear.
Yeah.
But, do you find that
it's not good enough?
You find that you have to see it in writing and hear it both to get it better?
Well, the issue is that in Asia, the tones, and anybody that's learning Chinese or has learned Chinese can probably attest to this.
Yeah.
We have very different tones where we speak from the very back and the very front. A lot of our words are being formed at the front, and some of their words are being formed like deeper in the throat. And it's you have to retrain your muscles, your speaking muscles, in order to hit those tones, and it can be quite difficult, actually.
Yeah. How well does your wife speak English? Does she say something and you say no?
Oh.
Yeah.
Not if I want to have dinner.
Yeah.
No, that's a funny statement for 2 reasons. Number one, their culture here. Now, this is something I'd like to tell your audience, because a lot of people, especially in America, if they have not traveled, they say Asia. They probably do not see a difference between China and Vietnam and Thailand and Laos and Cambodia. And they are incredibly different in their cultures. There are some similarities, but this culture, this Cambodian culture, Khmer culture, is so calm. In 6 years, and I'm not exaggerating, in 6 years, I've heard 2 people raise their voice in 2 years. Nobody fights. Nothing ever escalates to that point here. People are just very understanding. And so when I say my wife, we don't fight. And this is one of the big reasons that I'm here in Cambodia, is there's just not that desire to even go down that road, to that stressful road. If you don't agree on something, I can tell if you're paying attention. For my wife, if I ask her a question, a yes or no question, and she doesn't answer, I know it's no.
Yeah.
Like, hey, she's so nice. She doesn't want to say no. And I'm like, okay, it's no.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to go to that restaurant or whatever it might be. So, and also she speaks really well. But this speaks to the energy and the power of love. We don't always 100% understand each other. Sometimes she'll say something and I'll say, what? What did you just say? And then we laugh about it and then we figure it out.
Yeah. So you're in an entirely different culture. You go to Cambodia, and what was it that first attracted you to your wife?
I have always been a person who has been very attracted to who somebody is. My initial attraction to someone has never been how they look on the outside. The thing that endeared me to my wife more than from the beginning was that wherever we went, she would speak in her language. She would speak in Khmer. And so I had no idea what she was saying. And whether it was traveling or at a restaurant, she made everybody laugh. Everywhere we went, she would say something and they would laugh, and she would ease their tension, whether they were a waiter or a waitress or they were working at a bus station. She would speak to them and they would laugh. And my entire life, I did comedy. I did stand-up comedy. I never really saw the money end of the comedy. I did comedy because I love to make people happy and to have them laugh and to pull out of their stressful realities for a little bit. And my wife was doing the exact same thing. Even though I did not know what she was saying, it was evident when they would start laughing and they would start smiling. And I'm like, she is an amazing soul, an amazing soul.
Yeah. So let's wrap up this little part of it here. And by saying, what advice would you give somebody who's thinking about, seeing the rest of the world, seeing other cultures, just generally, how should they plan? What should they expect? What should they do? What kind of person do they have to be? What would you like to tell them?
If I could talk directly to people, I would say, get over your fear of traveling. There's so much that has played into our psyche since we were young about people saying no, and your parents wanting to keep you out of danger. Don't jump off the cliff into the lake like all the other kids are doing. Don't do this. Don't, not. And in improvisation, when I was studying with Jason Sudeikis in Las Vegas, we learned to say yes. Improv is always about yes. If you don't say yes in the scene is over. And I learned to start saying yes to more things in life. And what I learned when I started traveling was there's a lot of misconception about traveling in foreign countries, about China, about Russia. I think what people do is we have a reality, and our reality, if you are paying attention, is the common man reality. Most everybody that will listen to this podcast is going to be common men and common women of the earth. Okay. And the reality that scares us is the reality of the governments, right? And we see what's happening and what they do. That's so far removed from anything you're going to encounter when you go on a trip. When you travel, you're going to be with common men and common women, people who are going to work, mothers who are walking their kids to school, fathers and mothers who are going to work, people going out to enjoy themselves at a movie. This is the reality. This is one of the things I noticed right away in Russia was the common people of the earth are doing the same thing. They're of the same mindset. We don't have any misconceptions that one day we're going to be ruler or one day. We're just trying to survive and get through this life with a little bit. We want dignity, we want happiness, and we want to protect our families. And
Yeah.
that is across the board the same. Across the board, that is the same.
So that's the beauty of your story, as well as a word to those who would want to do this. And I interviewed recently a lady who's about 80 now. She's still hiking the country, and
Wow.
she's done the Triple Crown, you know, the Pacific Crest Trail, the Appalachian Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail. She completed all three of those as by doing long section hikes every year by the age of 76. Then she decided to do the American Discovery Trail, which is coast to coast.
Wow.
And so her second book is Aren't You Afraid? Because here's this 80-year-old woman out there by herself. And when you do the American Discovery Trail, it's not wilderness, because there's no wilderness that goes clear from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Yes.
Now you're going to get in on some trails sometimes, and she was good at that after 8,000 miles of trail walking. But she had to knock on doors to ask permission to put up her tent and so on. And everybody's question was, aren't you afraid? And she said, the news media will make you afraid. But I've found that the reality is that there are many, many, many more good people out there than there are people that want to do you harm.
I call ourselves the common people, Scott. We're the forest. There's so many more, like the people. This is another thing that I don't understand about the world, is that there's a few people making decisions that seem quite irrational at times. And the majority of the people, we're thinking the same. We want the same for each other. Look at what happens in the US. And I'm going to use the US as an example because I'm guessing that most of your listeners are in the US. When there's a hurricane, what happens? Look how many people go to help. I'm getting goosebumps right now. We care about each other. We love each other. And my book is to tell people that people are like, what's the lesson of life? We are the lesson in life. Helping each other, the connection that we have to each other is absolutely like the myofascia of the world, is how connected we are, and how the answer, if you boil down the answer, if you were to put all the answers you have in a big pot and boil it down, what would you bring out? Love. Love is absolutely the answer.
Yeah.
Her story is absolutely, she is 100% locked in, and she understands it. And there's a lot of us that can see what she sees and feel what she feels, but it's that you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. But boy, we are going to try to get you to drink.
Yeah.
We want you to understand.
Yeah, she's seeing making friends all over the United States, seeing exactly what you said, that we're all the same, while the politics changes from here to there, 100 miles here, 100 miles there, cities, country, and things like that. But she's seeing the same thing in people, like you just said, that they want these we all want these common things. We want connection, take care of our family, have a decent life, have some dignity for ourselves, and hopefully others. And so when you meet people on that thread, on that level, it's the barriers can fall down, I think.
Yeah, and sometimes I wonder, I think I don't really like to get into this aspect of it, but when I was on my journey, I saw my own state really divide over the governor there, over Scott Walker. And that was the first time I started seeing friends, like kind of attacking friends. And it just made me so sad, thinking what we have to get back to our commonalities. If you don't have a commonality with somebody, then you don't need to go down that road. Right? You don't need to go down that road. Like we need more connection and more understanding. A lot more separation is not good.
So what I agree 100% there. So what part of this have you learned from your travels, obviously, and what part might you not have learned if you hadn't traveled? In other words, travel's enriched your life, I think.
That is a great question. And I like hearing a question for the first time. Nobody has asked me, and nobody has asked me that. I would say that we have this understanding of how life should be, how life could be, I guess would be a better way to say it. But when you travel, you start to see they stop becoming thoughts and ideas, and you start creating your own reality. And this is, I could go very, very deep on spirituality and things that I have experienced, but suffice it to say that you can create your own reality. What you choose to bring in, what you choose to watch on television, whether you watch the news 5 hours a day and you're so involved, and this is going to make you a bit angry at society, right?
Yeah.
If you choose, like the lady you were talking about, if you choose to go out and hike, I didn't own a TV for about 8 years. Didn't miss it. I didn't miss it. And not to take anything away from the people who are making their money on entertainment on television. I understand that there's a big call for that, but you can create your own reality. I teach here in Cambodia. I'm a teacher at the local university here, Thanissaro University. And I tell my students all the time, you make your life, like you create your life, and what you allow in, like surround yourself with the best people. Don't surround, if you have somebody that's telling you you can't do something on a regular basis, they need to go, right? Just tell them you're busy the next time they want to hang out. We really, especially now in this life, need to surround ourselves with people who aren't just like, oh, hey, somebody who, to put it in a modern term, somebody who's not just hitting the like button, somebody who's sending you 3 gifts that say, you're awesome, you're fantastic, you can do this. Man, I'm so behind you. You are amazing. You're so talented. These are the people that you need to surround yourself with to create a happier reality, because it can be a very difficult world to traverse if you don't have those people in your corner.
Yeah. And cultivate that in ourselves, where we really can put ourselves aside enough to say, I hope this person succeeds, because it's possible for us not to do that.
It is, and that is such a conscious choice. You're a very good interviewer. It's a conscious choice to help people or to not help people, or to support someone or not support them. And one of the things that I find funny is that I have been watching a lot of YouTube and talk shows, different things, and how many people will watch a channel and not subscribe to it. And how difficult is it to subscribe to a channel? I have a channel, but I don't really put a lot out there. So this isn't for me, but I find it hilarious when I'm listening to them. They're like, okay, I have my statistics and only 30% of you have subscribed. It's so easy, right? If you like something, to do a click, you're subscribed, you liked it, and that helps that person out.
It's true.
But people don't do it. But it's a conscious decision, right? It can be so simple, Scott. It can be simple.
You're right. That helps them more than they realize. And if you write a book, it is very difficult to get reviews. And for instance, on Amazon, and it doesn't take a lot of time, because if you don't want to write something, you can just click the number of stars and you can write a 1-word review, great, or something. Yeah. And they've got a review and it helps them. And so it's not, like you say, it's not that hard, and people don't realize how much that does help.
Yes. And that is one thing I understand very well is the it's the reviews. It can be very easy, like you said, just go and click the 5 stars. Even if and this is getting a little bit into the business aspect of the algorithms of Amazon, even if people just even if they don't buy your book, but they just go and check it out, that helps you out.
Yeah.
Even if they just go look at it.
Yeah. So I think usually I get a chance to read people's books before I ever do an interview, but I didn't get a chance to do that this time. But I did check out your book, and I know that you have 2 episodes out of a 10-part series, I think.
It's a three-part series.
Oh, it's a 3-part. Okay.
Yeah, 3.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I thought 10. Oh, I know why I thought 10, because I just wrote a novel that's 220 pages. And I think, well, of course, it was about 60,000 words, 70,000 words, something like that. Yeah, so that'd be about a 3-volume series.
Yeah.
So 3-volume series, everybody, and 2 parts around.
Yeah, when I wrote this, this is the first thing I have ever written. And yesterday, I can tell you this, this is brand new even to me. There is a very good reviewing company out there, an award, they give out awards. Jim Carrey won an award from them. People love it, called Reader's Favorite. And I received a 5-star review from them, and I've elated. I was so nervous, Scott, to open it up and see what they said. And this is my art, and this is my love and my heart and my soul. And you put it out there, and you can only hope that people see what you're trying to get across to them. And they did. And it was such a feeling of a little bit of relief and a little bit of joy that somebody saw my intention, what I wanted to get across.
Well, we're coming to another part here that we might ask you about. But I think that, and talking about getting something out there, I think you put your heart into the book. And that's what you're exposing to people. And so very briefly, I think you do that in your comedy or when you were doing improv. That must be a very, very tough thing to get up in front of an audience and give this routine. And if it doesn't go over, you just keep going, and until maybe something.
I love stand-up, and I love improv. I love that little ant running around there. I love improv. Maybe I should get rid of these things here. I don't know if you can see them or not.
I can't see them.
Okay, good. These little pop-ups. I got into to stand up, and I went to, of all places, the first place I went was the Thunderbird Lounge in Las Vegas, which back in the day was super famous for the Rat Pack and Elvis Presley. And I would see their photos on the wall. And I always have felt in my life like I've walked that energy line, like the same energy lines that a lot of people who have had success in entertainment have walked. I mean, I met Jason Sudeikis, Kay Cannon, another friend of mine, Hash Patel, who's on a lot of television. And I've walked that line. I've been with these people, but that was not my journey, right? This was my journey. But I do miss the stand-up. I did stand-up at the Comedy Store in LA and in different places in New York City, and all amateur. I loved it. I fell in love with it. But it was the aspect of making people laugh that I love the most. And so now I do that with my students here in Siem Reap.
Cool. Yeah. So how difficult was that to do? How tough did you have to be? How different was it to do it in Los Angeles from, because we already said we have commonalities, but New York to Los Angeles, how different was that? Big difference, yeah. So you have to present a little bit differently.
Yeah, it's the presentation, but for me, it was about the folks that I was around. When I was in New York City, I was with a man named Ashley Strand, who became one of my best friends. BC, one of my best friends, who he let me stay with him the night before I got on my plane in New York City at JFK to go over to Russia. He let me stay at his apartment on 42nd Avenue. And that's a whole nother story. If I could just touch on him, he actually has a website called Clonan because he looks exactly like Conan O'Brien.
Oh,
To the
okay.
point, Scott, he had to shave his head so people didn't stop him on the street. And he has got a lot of stories. He's got a Beetlejuice museum in his apartment. I will get way off topic, but these are the characters. These are the people that I have met in my life. Dan Goodman, amazing comedian, still doing comedy in New York. I mentioned him briefly in my second book. Ian Gent, just comedy that was so obscure, and it was our group. Our entire group was obscure, and that was my favorite part of my comedy journey was New York City. It was amazing. I've never had difficulty getting up in front of people and talking. That's never been an issue for me. That's thank goodness, a gift that I have. My bachelor's degree is in communication, speech, writing, English, TV and radio. But if you have something that doesn't go over, it just doesn't go over. And then you realize either I need to change that or just get rid of it. And that is the decision that you come to is, okay, people just don't get this. I used to do an imitation. I'm not kidding you, Scott. I did this imitation on stage for 2 years before somebody laughed. And I'll show you, I know your audience can't see. So I say, this is my imitation of a turtle. And so I just do the paws moving, the hands moving very slow. And I have this look on my face like a turtle, just staring ahead. And then I go, this is my imitation of that same turtle in a hurry, still doing the same movement, but he lifts up his paw and checks his watch. Right? he can't go any faster, right? So he checks his watch to see how late he's going to be. And it took 2 years, but when I got that laugh on that joke, I felt like I had conquered the world. I'm like, I did it.
Did you change anything on the joke, the timing or the delivery?
No, nothing. That was a very simple joke. I just found the hilarity in the obscure. And for audiences, they're more in tune to a different type of comedy. You have to find the right audience for that too.
Yeah. So in all of this, now we're getting into the meaning of your travel beyond how much it costs and everything. So I have this feeling that when you started some of this traveling, that there were some dark days too. Is that correct?
Oh, I guess got really sad. I am what people would call empathic, so I have very strong energies for how people feel. When I was in Vietnam, in Nha Trang was when they had the Sandy Hook shootings, and there's no darker day that I could have had on my journey than that. And I hadn't turned on the TV. I was in such a world of bliss and meeting people and meeting just wonderful trips, just having such an experience. And then one day I woke up, it was at the Happy Hotel in Nha Trang, Vietnam. And I felt like I needed to turn on the TV. It was kind of like an instinct. So I turned it on, and then I saw that what was unfolding at Sandy Hook Elementary School, and my heart sank, and I just tears rolling out of my eyes. And I had met a lady there. It was actually a friend had told me about her, and she was kind of guiding me around Nha Trang. Each day would show me some things, and each day we would have we would meet up for lunch and have a coffee. And I met up with her, and I told her what happened, and she was very sad. And that evening, for the first time, when I was younger, I went to a Catholic school, St. Patrick's Catholic school in Sparta, Wisconsin. and beautiful place, great education, but we were over churched, and as so became a little removed from the church after my schooling was done. I hadn't gone back to church. And that night, Lily and I went to a Catholic church in the Trang. And I remember we walked in a little bit late. Oh, I can see it clear as day. Walked in, I looked up, the church is full. We sat in the back. I saw Jesus on the cross and floodgates, just absolute tears. And I'm not a person to wipe them away. I think that is an expression that should not be hidden. People are like, oh, I'm sorry if I cry. No, let it roll. That needs to come out. And I just let it come out. And that was by far the darkest day of my trip. And I pay a special tribute to that in book 2 also at the end of that chapter.
Yeah. So when I turned 40, I was a kid. I was, and I thought, that's the one birthday where I wouldn't let anybody mention it. Tried not to think about it, all of that. And then it's over. And then I think I could do anything at 40. I was just so young. There was no limitations. Why did I do that? And then, but your series is kind of called Finding 42, right?
Yes.
So what's so significant about 42?
The easy thing for people to understand is that when I turned 42, that's when I made the decision to go on this journey. And when I did all the planning, and in October of 2012, I went on the journey. So I planned it, set it up, and went on the journey at age 42. Now, if you want to get into, I told you I can go very deep spiritually. 42, I just started seeing 42 everywhere. I'd go to a restaurant and they'd give me a number and it was 42. I would get change and it was like $1.42. I look at the clock. It's now, mind you, there's only 60 possibilities, but 42 often. I sent you an email this morning and I did not plan it, but I forget the exact time, but it was something 42. And this is, for me, people often ask me 42, what does it mean when you see these numbers over and over? And like I told you before, Scott, I'm very much the middle, right? So I understand shaman, psychics, I get it and I believe them, but that's not I don't do that. But at the same time, I understand they are 100% in that world. I get that. For me, 42 means that I'm on my right path. Sometimes 42 means when I see 42, I think, okay, pay attention. There may be something important coming up, something to that effect. I don't like to read too much into something. I don't want to sell my reality on if I see 42 in a week, I'm going to be super wealthy. It's a little bit far-fetched. I think that the universe speaks to us in threads. When I say the universe, I really feel that everything has a motion and that we need to stay in motion and that it will give you threads, and what you choose to look at or believe or make your reality will become truth to you. And there are many people who have many different thoughts on why we're here or how to get through it. And that is their reality. But my reality is that when I see 42, I just feel like it's the right path indicator. Like, hey, you're where you're supposed to be.
So that explains it on a number of levels, because obviously your journey was not just a travel log, although you saw a lot of beautiful places, a lot of different cultures, but it wasn't just a trip, it was a journey.
Yes. And this is,
go ahead, please.
If I may interject, this was, I think, the most difficult aspect about finding 42 is I didn't know how to market it, because it's very soulful to me and very heartfelt, and it is me. The book is me. But it's an adventure. There's the fire horse story. There's the Trans-Siberian.
Yeah.
There's swimming in the ocean in the Trang in the evening. Some very awesome stories. The Annapurna Mountains, trekking through those. And I'm not a mountain climber, so it's not a story of, wow, I'm amazing and awesome in the mountains. It's a story of, man, I could probably die here because this is really wiping me out. And how do you market that? Like, it's adventure, it's spiritual, but it also has a lot of information if you're going to travel in these areas about what you can see, how awesome the people are, and so on.
It's very obvious. This is a very deep story. And if you can hold up your book or whatever you can do there. Excellent.
A little bit backwards.
I wanted people to be able to see the titles so they recognize it when they look for it.
Oh, okay.
Finding 42. And this is the second volume, right?
Yes. And the first volume, I have my first book. Pacheka, can you bring me a copy of my first book?
Yeah. So
but I do have these. So this is even bigger. I had these made. That's the first book there, Finding 42.
Yes, A Soul's Awakening. So that's going to be something you're going to want to check out. And you also have an audio version, professionally narrated. Sounds very nice. I've listened to that as much as I could.
You know, if I can add something about my narrator, Adam Trupp, that was everything in my process. Thanks, Ben. You want to say hello? You want to say hello?
Awesome. Yeah. Hello. Hi.
You want to say hello? Come on, say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Very nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
Yeah. This is awesome. Talking to you halfway around the world. Yeah. So
that I know that'll be it for her. That's a lot.
Yeah.
They're not grandstanders.
Right. Okay, so let me ask you another question here. 42 was very significant for you. You just told me that you're going to be 52. What's the difference between 42 and 52? What have you learned in those 10 years?
Wisdom, right? Like I tell my students, I try to explain to them, I'm like, you feel that you know the world, you know a lot about the world, and you have it all right now. I said, I'm 30 years older than you, right? Like, imagine so I try to speak as to the lessons and when I say wisdom, it's not like I'm going to grow a big white beard, and nothing is about ego for me, but it's an understanding that in our connection to each other, we can learn a lot. And I'm not saying that there's never a point where somebody else's journey is going to become our journey. They can become a speaker or a lesson, or not so much a lesson as a story. And then we have to, it's like when mom and dad used to say things to us when we were kids, and then we would get upset. And then when we turned 18, it was like, they were right? It's that understanding that people, we have to go through our own journey. We have to experience. My book is called the Experiencer Series. And if I can say one thing on that, the experiencer, well, people may say we all experience things. Yes, but if you're not aware or awake or understanding that you are experiencing, then it's a little bit different, right? You have to have that. And everybody, I think the funniest thing about 42, at age 42, was when I said, I knew, when I look back at my life, I can see that I always knew how to be a good person, how to be nice to other people, how to make it through. But I didn't know that I knew, right?
Yeah.
And when you become awake, you become aware of your knowledge, and you become aware of your spot in the entire connection, or the big spider web of the world. And I tell my students, I go, the best thing you can understand in life is really, truthfully, in your heart, what do you want out of this? Do you want happiness? That's going to be a different path. And some people are going to want to go after money. Okay. Understand that and go after it. But understand what you truly want. Because even when I was doing comedy, I didn't realize that I wasn't after it for the money. I wasn't chasing a career. I just enjoyed making people laugh. And so the book, of all things, at age 42, age 43, is when I understood that I'm a writer. And this is what I need to do to express my comedy, to express my love for life and my love for humankind and the earth in one area, in one book.
Yeah. So I think to wrap that part up, and I want everybody to go to Amazon and check out the book. It's on Amazon exclusively, or?
It is. That's a whole nother story that we could get into at another time. But I took everything. I had a publisher help me, and I'm grateful, because I knew nothing about this process. I had nobody helping me. Everything was on my own. And let me tell you, that is a difficult road to go down. But this is another aspect of seeing how your life is connected. When I did comedy for 9 years, I met a lot of great people. I went to LA, I lived in New York City, but I never made it, right? I never made that where I can say, hey, look, I'm on Comedy Central, or hey, I'm going to be on David Letterman tonight. I never reached that point. When I wrote this book, it became a must do for me. I said, I have to see this through. I have to get this done to mark my life as having done. I've done a lot in my life, but now I have an actual book out, and that became paramount in my life. This needs to be done. So in a way, having done comedy for so long, but not making it in comedy, as they would say, to have a career, that boosted my energies to get this book out and to get it done.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
I am exclusively I definitely go the long way around, but exclusively right now on Amazon. You could go and get me through other sources, but I won't see any money from it.
Yeah. I kind of understand that. It took me 2 years to write my first book. I had no idea how to do it. And I work with a lot of editors. And then you kind of learn how to do it a little bit, at least 10 times what you did know. Costs a lot of money.
Won't you agree, Scott, that you learn what you can do and what you're great at doing, and what you are able to put forth in your book, but you also learn, hey man, you need an editor, somebody else's eyes on your book, definitely, and you need a good cover design. Like that's very important.
Yeah. When you finish a book, you've got to have it professionally proofread, because I mean, even if you could proofread it yourself, you still need another set of eyes. And probably most people are not professional proofwriters anyway, or proof editors. And so you need at least that. Maybe you do some of your own copy and line editing, but you've got to have that, and you've got to have that nice clean cover design.
Yes.
And you have to kind of have a team to work with.
I'm going to do something here, because you could see this on Amazon, and you might see it on Amazon anyway. I will show you my first book cover. Okay. Before I decided, hey, so after I put out book one, it really became about learning and redoing book one. So you saw the cover for book one. Now, this is the original cover that I had a lot of say in. And then I realized, Scott, maybe I shouldn't have a say in it. Right. But I love it, but you'll see you have 40 cut the rope, which means that's still in the title for the new book, which means you have to cut the rope. You have to say, I'm going to go. But you see,
Yeah.
I wanted a water buffalo to show that I was in Asia. Then we have a
Yeah.
silly man jumping off a rope that's breaking. And you see it's a darker color, but it has the gold in it. I love it. And a lot of my friends have this version, but I thought that needed to change.
Yeah. Yeah. For my next book, I had a cover idea. So I sent it to a professional designer and they did a really nice job with it. And then I realized it didn't fit the mood of the book.
Yeah.
Because it was very mellow and it's really nice. But it's not dramatic.
Yeah.
And this is a work of fiction. And so it's kind of has a lot of action in it and stuff. So we have to go back to the drawing board on that one, I think.
And I think that's a very good thing for any aspiring writers out there. Don't be afraid to go back to the drawing board. I was just at a readers festival here in Siem Reap, and a couple things. I was in a panel discussion with 5 other authors, and the man asked us all, have any of you made your money back on the book? And there was laughter amongst all of us, like, no. If you're a writer, it feels like it's something that needs to come out of you, something that needs to get into print and that you need to share with people. Right. Yeah. And if the money comes, most likely, if you did a percentage of authors who made their money back, it's going to be very low percentage.
Well, you have to keep writing, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've got 20 books out there, they kind of feed off of each other in the algorithm. And if you've kept in touch with the people that do like your writing, and, it's a long-term project.
It is.
But all right. So I'm going to say one more thing to kind of wrap this up. And that is awareness. That's the big human gift. That's the thing we really need. That's in the long run the thing that really enriches life. You have to live intentionally. So I'm going to add one more thing, because you're 10 years older than when you went on planned and went on your trip, your voyage. And I'm 20 years older than you are. So I'm just going to encourage everybody that there's never a time in life that I've found when you're not just, filling up the next decade with something that's even better.
Yes, this is true. I think about this, that I'm going to be 52. I have 2 books out. If you would have asked me even when I was 40, are you going to be an author? I would have scoffed at the idea. I would have said, no. Number 1, I can't type. Number 2, I don't think I have the patience for it. But then you learn that when you're putting your heart on paper, whether it's your story or whether it's fiction, if it's something that you love, time is irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant. I think about, as a comedian, I think about Rodney Dangerfield was painting houses, and I think he became famous in his late 40s.
Probably,
yeah. Like there's no set time for anything. And I would say that when you become a writer after age 40, after age 50, after age 60, look at the experience and the understanding of this life that you can hand off to younger generations, that you can gift them. Basically, you're gifting yourself. And you have a written piece that keeps you on this earth long after you're gone. I think that's an amazing thing too.
Well, I think it is too. Yeah, it's something that people can know you by. Maybe your family will even know you better. eventually.
Yes.
So you never know.
Yes. And I agree. If I can touch on that, my books, I have a lot of one-liners in there. I have some lines that are just for my sister, or just for my mother, or just for a friend, that they would understand it. But that's how much I love people, is that I want to acknowledge them. I want to, I may never get on a stage and be able to say, I'd like to thank the following 10,000 people for having a beautiful effect on my life. Difficult to do, but in my writing, I can just give them a little, hey, I remember you and I appreciate you.
Yeah. Okay, Benny, I think I'm gonna go ahead and stop this here, and
Okay.